Hey, welcome to Tim Stating the Obvious, our first ever YouTube live show, taking the podcast live and in person. I can't say enough how excited I am that we're able to do this in just 6 weeks after launching our podcast on Podbean, and on iTunes. So, like I stated before, this is the second part of a two-part series that we're doing based on mentorship. I do want to dive right into the show here with Enrique. So he is super busy in his life right now. I know this week alone you have your daughter graduating from high school, and you got a couple soccer tournaments going on this weekend. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, soccer graduation. I'm sorry, high school graduation. Uh, Long weekend of soccer tournament games all weekend throughout. And of course, as you know, we're prepping for our big move here within the next month. Uh, lots of life events.
Yeah, and I know as leaders, it doesn't seem like anything ever stops. So we got our day job, we got our family job, and then we have our transition period whenever that comes up into effect as well. So I mean, it just seems just like right around the corner. Like yesterday, I met you, but it's like almost. I think you said like what 9, 10 years ago at this point.
It's been 9 years, but it just goes by so fast. I can remember the first time we met. We were super busy. I think if I recall correctly, you were on the phone trying to handle some business or whatnot, and you really didn't have time for that initial meet and greet. But luckily, as time went on and we were working together, we got to know each other pretty well, hang out socially after hours, and really form some, I guess, a tight knit bond.
Yeah, I think so, man. I mean, we've kept in touch for 10 years. Most people who know me, like, I try, I do try, but I'm just horrible at keeping in touch with people. So it's like, one or two people here or there that I'm able to legitimately keep in touch with. And you're right. Like, I was in my office and on the phone and handling some business. And I know you came by. You were like doing the peer to peer thing, going, "Hey, how you doing? I'm the new guy. Nice to meet you." And I was kind of like, "Yeah, like what do you want?" Because nobody ever really comes to see me unless they really want something. So it's like, "What do you want?"
Right.
And you were like, "Oh, I kind of need this thing done." I was like, "Okay, well, you go see those people over there, and they'll take care of you." And I was very dismissive, but as we talk about the show about mentorship, it's really about the relationship piece that we build with people. And I know as we were junior, we didn't get necessarily afforded the time to do that. But what do you think about that?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. We're always at a fast moving, high demand, high off tempo positions that we take, and as we at least as juniors, right? We're out there trying to prove ourselves, trying to master our craft, uh, and to hopefully with the intent of um, assuming more responsibilities, for career advancement. Yeah, that's actually part of it, career advancement. So we're moving fast. We're at a fast pace, op tempo, but we usually don't take that time to establish those relationships, like you just mentioned. But I think over time, as we become a little more senior, uh, and we grow in experience, we learn the value of the relationships and the importance of those relationships and what it really means for organizations to have good, healthy relationships. And it's all tied in, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, like it's everything like you said is about relationships, and as we get older and more seasoned in our craft and what we do as leaders and professionals, I think we find more and more it's not just necessarily how smart you are, but those relationships that you build along the way. I know I call on you frequently, and say, hey man, what do you think about this, and vice versa. So, but before we get into the actual meat of the show where we talk about mentorship, I do want to give a brief disclaimer. So, this show is about creating a dialogue between two professionals. So, it's about Enrique and Tim sharing, having a shared conversation. They don't reflect any an official stance or position of any organization that we may work for. And any comments and discussion that we have is for educational purpose and learning and growth and development, and also for education purposes and entertainment. It does not reflect any. Hold on one second here. It does not reflect any official stance that we have. Sorry, my computer was acting up there for a second. Any official stance on anything other than Enrique has Enrique's opinion and Tim has Tim's opinion, and that's it. There's nobody else's opinion. So with that, Enrique, I do want to get to the first question. You actually came up with the topic when I approached you about, hey, I'm kind of doing a podcast about leadership and mentorship principles. Where, you know, what would you like to see? You gave me some feedback, which I valued, and it was awesome to help me get the ball rolling. But you also said that mentorship was be something that you'd be interested in talking about. So why was it on your mind a lot lately, and why do you want that to be a topic?
It was really on my mind because I was actually approached by some junior members of my organization, and um, they were asking questions about personal and career goals, how to properly balance, what to expect, and I don't want to say I was surprised. I kind of had been thinking about these things, but I was somewhat surprised at how much they didn't know. Nobody, on at least three occasions, nobody had sat down and talked to them to these people about what are their goals, what are their aspirations, and how to get there. What setting realistic expectations. Um, because as we go on in our career field, um, you know, everything is built upon, right? Our profession is built upon. You don't just become automatically the CEO, right? There's you have to meet certain benchmarks, certain positions, certain managerial positions, certain leadership positions. But what I noticed right away from this last conversation I had, in fact, it was last week. It was a hallway conversation that I ran into a junior member. He asked a couple questions, and 40 minutes later, uh, he was in tune, listening, not trying to bash millennials or anything like that, but he's part of the millennial group, and so it was a little bit refreshing for someone to be open to suggestions, recommendations, and not just that, but I gave him my card, and about an hour later, when I got to my office, because I had offered up, hey, if you need anything, just shoot me a note. If there's something you can't think of now, shoot me a note, and I'll give you whatever products I have. And an hour later, I kid you not, there's the email. Hey, thanks for the conversation in the hallway. I'm looking forward to, potentially talking to you again later. You mentioned that you might have some products. Could you share those with me? And that's exactly what I did. I shared with him uh, my career map and some of the things that I had done, products wise, and how up to this point I've been successful. I also pointed out that two things, that these were products that I developed on my own because I hadn't had any mentorship. That's not entirely 100% true. I had mentorship, just not formal mentorship. So um, the products that I built were really learning. I guess the term would be, I guess, learning stuff the hard way. Really, just nugging through the eaches, trying to get to answers without any guidance. Right. So hard learning on my own, discovery learning, I think is the term I was looking for. And the second thing that I explained to him was, whatever it is I give you, whatever products I give you, share them openly, because if they're going to help you, um, then I'm pretty sure there's guys that guys and gals that who probably need help too, but don't want to ask. Um, so that was the caveat I gave them. Make my product your own, refine it as you need it, so that it will help you on your career path, and also share it. Uh, so I thought that was pretty refreshing, and that's really why this whole mentorship piece was on my mind at the time. And so looking back a little bit on my career and understanding that no one really talked to me about what it was that I needed to do to be successful. And I think you mentioned on one of our other conversations about the professionalism and the careerist, right? So there is the difference in those things, but you have to have a little bit of both, so that you're not, I think, so that you're not stagnant, if you will. And I think mentorship is part of that. How do we get and you don't have to be a junior. You could be a senior level guy, a mid level guy like you and I. How do we get this kind of dialogue going for individuals to help improve the overall organization? Because I think a lot of what we do is organizationally based, right? We're judged on how well our organizations accomplish challenges.
Yeah. So,
And
I'm just gonna jump in here real quick because you said a lot of good things. So before we go talk about the careerist versus the professional, so I really find a lot of times that there's a lot of people out there looking for a little bit extra guidance and a little bit extra direction. So like no matter what we're doing, I it always seems like even just like last week, there was somebody who was just a little bit more junior, came to the organization, clearly wasn't where they probably should be, but instead of trying to shine or showboat or try to make somebody else look bad so they can look better, they legitimately said, hey, you seem like you know what you're talking about. Can you help me get to where I need to be so that way I can help move everything in the right direction? Because I do see there's problems, but I don't know how to affect that. And this person definitely wasn't going to get it in the department and that they worked in, just based on how that was structured. But I do find, just with that, not with only that instance, but other instances, people are always looking, for something else. And just like you said, people are always saying, hey, I wish somebody had told me this like 10 years ago. Or I wish somebody told me this like 5 years ago. Or I wish I had somebody else to be able to provide some type of insight to help me through a problem that I didn't quite already know the answer to. So I agree with you that mentorship is definitely something that we as mid-careerist, as you would call it, need to embrace because we're kind of like the bridge between the more senior people and the junior people coming up. And if we are not the honest brokers of that conversation, then there's a whole bunch of people going to be missing out on a lot of goodness. And I say goodness because you have, over 20 years of experience. I have, over 16 years of experience. And so combined, if everybody was to input their little piece and imprint them onto somebody else who they see potential in, everything in an organization would just get that much better and streamlined. So with the with this, I do want to define three terms because I'm not quite sure people who are watching this may know the difference between the couple terms. So there's coaching or there's teaching, there's coaching, and there's mentoring, right? So in my podcast earlier this last week, I talked about how teaching is where you're like instructing people. This is how you get to yes. It's more supervisor to subordinate roles and responsibilities, right? Coaching is more like the boss to a subordinate, getting them to yes or getting them to the right answer. Where mentoring is more somebody who's removed from the situation, not involved in your problem set, but also has a greater level of experience than you do, and can provide that art to help you see yourself, see where you fit in the big picture, and help you move forward and let you know what you need to hear. So with those foundationals of definitions, Let's talk about the careerist versus the professional. I think it's very clear to see if I'm the careerist, right? I'm the guy who's just checking the block. I really don't care about who's working with me. I don't care about who my boss is. I don't care about the guy to my right or the gal to my left is. I don't really care about that. I care about getting my job done and me looking good, so I can advance my career. Where I think the professional is, hey, I care about the organization and I care about the people, and I'm going to invest my time in the people to help the organization get better. What do you think about that?
So I think you're absolutely spot on with your definitions, and really, since our last conversation and up till now, I've done quite a lot of internalization about the professionalism and the careers, and which one am I, right? So which one? How do I see myself? So a little bit of that self-reflecting piece, self-reflection on where I'm at now, where I've been, where I'm at now, and where I'm possibly going to be in the future, right? So how do I take what I've learned, going back a little bit earlier in our conversation, on seeing some of the gaps, right? The capabilities gaps for younger junior members of my organization, and how do I move forward with that stuff? So definitely the challenge, I think, from the teaching, coaching, and mentoring for where we're at now, it's hard to be patient for the teaching and coaching piece, right? Because I'm a professional, and so a lot of what I see my role in is giving that guidance, right? To giving those nuggets to people who need it, to forever, for whatever reasons, self improvement, doing self career management, and just helping people really achieve their potential, right? So when I think about mentorship, I think of how do we help individuals reach their maximum potential, which will in turn help the organization, right, become a learning organization if it's not there. And how does it get better, right? Because we see it all over the place. You see on the news, like big corporations that go away because they don't adapt. They don't they don't look forward and use resources, or develop techniques to stay ahead of their competitors, and they become stagnant, and they fall to the wayside. I mean, and in some cases, as recently, and pick your corporation, 100-year-old corporation that didn't use the internet, right, to project sales, if you will, and sticking to antiquated methods. And guess what? They're on the brink of oblivion, for lack of a better term. But yes, coaching, teaching, and mentoring are all key. But how do we, how do we do that for organizations? And part of that, I think, in my opinion, is formal and informal mentorship, right? That has to be 50-50.
Yeah.
It has to be 50-50 midway point. If you need help as a junior, or even peer, or a senior level executive, if you will, they have to be able to meet in the middle, right? So for myself, the way I see myself in a midway point, junior guys and gals and senior executives, they are, a lot of the experience is up top. I mean, they're executives for a reason, but they get into this almost cyclical. They're back into this fast paced movers and shakers, kind of where we were at our younger stages, trying to get to where we're at now, just moving and shaking. But I think at this point, as the mid level guys, we can be the bridge for either the junior to senior, or just the bridge in general, getting 50-50, to where identifying people who need mentorship and encouraging them to seek it out. If for example, I see someone and we're just not connecting, because communication is key, but I know that they need mentorship, I should be able to direct them to, hey, maybe you should talk to John Doe over here, and I can get a hold of Jane Doe and say, hey, this is someone who has potential. Could you talk to him about your career path? to see, to engage them really, to make them uh, think outside of the box a little, use a little more critical thinking. Um, so that's kind of how I see it. And formal and informal mentorship can take place in a variety of ways.
So
I think.
when you say formal and informal, right? So what what are you really talking about? The formal and informal mentorship. So are you talking about? Well, you define it for us.
So yeah, I mean, a great question. I think when you look at formal, and the way, and this is again how I see it. When you look at formal mentorship, you can have seminars, professional seminars that are either conducted externally or hired by an organization that hires out, say, a specialty firm to come in and teach a course, go over lectures formally, right? Maybe even assign homework or reading assignments to say, hey, and come back and say, what was your takeaway off of this piece of lecture, or what was your takeaway from this particular piece of literature, and how would you adapt it or use it for your organization? That's kind of how I see more formalized.
Okay, so you're also talking about too, if let's say, as part of the talent management program, right? So some organizations where I've seen they have actually paired up um, a more senior person who is a mover and a shaker, and he's going somewhere in the organization, and paired them up with someone junior who they view as got a lot of talent, and they say, hey, this person is going to be your mentor for this organization, and this is how we are
Mm-hmm.
going to get this is our show to you, that we think that you're worth the future of this company, so is that
Right,
what you're
we're
talking about, those
committed.
things? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. That's kind of how I see truly formal mentorship. That and in some organizations, it's mandatory, for lack of a better term. It's expected, right? Whereas some of the organizations that you and I have been in, it there are half-hearted attempts at doing some of these things, right? And you and I, we did a few of them together. It was kind of like, okay, who's really in charge here, and what's the bottom line of what we're trying to accomplish? So again, that's how I view, or I define formal mentorship. Informal mentorship, I see it as a random conversation. Random is probably not a good word, but a conversation back up with someone on whatever, kind of like what I mentioned earlier when I was walking down the hallway. I walked up to a junior who had recognized me from a previous organization, and it started off as a hello and hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing A, B, C, and D, and I'm pretty soon I'm off to do great things at this other organization, and I get the questions of, hey, am I doing the right thing? Right? Even though we have
Right.
separate career fields, but as a human resources uh, uh, professional, and being that I have access to lots of uh, uh, files,
Yep.
right? Personnel files. I've seen what a lot of folks have done for the career aspect be successful. So I'm able to articulate that to them, and kind of like paint the picture, give them a once over. Um, so as simple as something like that. Another informal piece could be, you know, getting to a meeting where you have the new guy who's the hot shot comes in, and he's breathing fire. He's on fire to make his mark, and in some ways could potentially rub all the old timers the wrong way, right? Because the old timers, they get a vote. They've seen a lot of stuff. Case in point was a meeting that I sat in on, our standard Thursday afternoon meeting to go over events and really calendar sync. The new guy, wasn't impressed with the products, wasn't impressed on the delivery,
Mm-hmm.
and he was absolutely right. There were hiccups in the meeting, probably because of complacency, and I've been sitting in that meeting for the last 18, 19 months. So I understood where he was coming from, but when he was, you know bad mouthing, if you will, for lack of a better
Right.
term, the quality of the meeting. And no one really said anything. They were like, well, okay, you're right. But I took that as an opportunity to let them know, hey, there is value to be added from the information. Yes, and now again, I was not in the lead for this meeting, but I've been a participant for 18, 19 months.
Right.
I explained to him how it was value added, and some of the other audience members, became a little more vocal, nodded in agreement, and said, "Yeah, Enrique is right. There is value to be added here, so we can't just discount the whole thing." The recommendation was to the new guy, if you've got some ideas to improve what we have, then by all means, you know, your delivery is probably a little off, but let us know what you got. And sure enough, he came in this week, and he had his products ready. So the good thing was he cared about the organization. He wanted to see the organization improve. However, that initial first contact, first impression was, hey, I'm I know exactly what I'm talking about, and the rest of you don't.
Right.
So that informal mentorship, that informal conversation piece, to get him to backtrack a little bit and survey, do his assessment before coming down, and you know do an assessment before you go in and just trash what's in existence, because if it's working, that's a good thing. Is it working perfectly? Okay, there's room for improvement, and there's usually room for improvement in anything you do.
Right.
Um, and I think that's part of the informal piece, even a peer to peer conversation about, hey, did you think about, um, you know, uh, based on some of the actions you're taking, did you think about what's going to happen, as we call the second and third order effects? So, and at least this case, he was very receptive, and he understood. It seemed as though he internalized and came back ready with, okay, I'm going to come back with products and ideas versus just bashing.
Yeah. So I want to take you back to a point that you made like a minute ago about how you said that a lot of people know what the right thing to do is professionally because everyone has a career map, right? So when you join an organization, they say these are the things that you need to do to be successful, right? But then inevitably along the way, we always have a question of, am I doing the right thing? Because it doesn't feel like I'm doing the right thing. And it's weird that we would have a career map and people would follow it. So people know the right things to do and how to be successful. But then at the same time go, I'm not quite sure if I'm doing the right thing. So I think you're absolutely right. Like that's where a mentor would come in and say, no, you're not doing the right thing for you. So maybe for somebody else, but it doesn't really fit you to do this. So I do want to see what your ideas are when you go back and you talk to people and you tell them, your honest input, because sometimes honest input is hard to hear. As a mentor, like I have a mentor. At least I view him as a mentor. He probably doesn't know it, but I still view him as a mentor. He tells me all the time the things that I need to hear and not the things that I want to hear. And a lot of times it's like, man, I thought I made the right move or I thought I made the right choice when in reality I didn't. I was doing what I thought was right because that's what the check the block thing says to get to point A to point B. But in reality, it would have set me back even more if I would have stayed there. So, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. At some point, you have to take, yeah, at least as an individual, you have to take a step back and and look at what you're trying to accomplish, right? Um, but so I think it kind of goes back to my whole 50-50 uh, that I talked about earlier. Um, you have to self-internalize, and the guy above you that's maybe in charge of you, or even a peer, has to be able to come forward and have the courage to say, hey guy or gal, you might want to think about these things, because if you don't change course or modify how you're doing things, there can be negative impacts later for the career aspect. Because again, in many ways, we have to find that balance, right? Very rarely will you find, oh, and maybe that's not such a good term, but not necessarily rarely, but there are times where you'll find folks that aren't balanced, right? So those few people that just keep hard charging, they do a lot of damage to a variety of things, right? Longer term, their career, personal relationships, they don't have that balance. So if you come back and you get somebody to talk to them and say, "Guy, you got look at how you're operating. You're running yourself into the ground. Take little bites. Don't have to eat the whole cake at once. Take a couple of bites because you're not achieving balance." And I've had uh, I think you gotta be able to at times surge, right? You got to be able to surge for a big project. Like this project demands 100% of my efforts, and if that means a couple of long nights, if that means a couple overnights in the office or what have you with the team,
Yep.
right? The balance would be, okay, we accomplished this, whatever it was, whatever this goal was, we've accomplished it. Now it's time to take a couple of days off. I mean, that's pretty simplistic, right? But it means what it means. So when you're at work, you're at work. When you and I struggle with this even to this day after all these years. When you're at work, you're at work. But when you're at home, be at home. So if that's with your pet cat, your wife and kids, or hanging out socially with your friends outside of the organization to um, go out fishing or go out having a few drinks socially. So being able to turn it off, uh, that is the engine that's inside of us that keeps pushing. For so and you and I have been, I would say, similar experience, right? Where we're expected to perform, especially at the junior level, just perform, 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 and then we get to where we're at now, mid manager level. How do we turn that off so much as to getting the people around us that are going to getting that team together that we need to accomplish whatever, right? Because at a certain point in time, we can't be the doers. We have to be the managers, and we have to be able to create our teams. And how do you maintain talent? How do you grow talent? Right, the talent management piece again. And so balance, mentorship is a way to get there. That's again what I think. And so as I've changed gears or switched gears, realizing now that I am not the junior guy trying to prove myself, I, I've kind of gotten to that happier place, if you will. The balance piece coming back to it being that when I'm able to turn it off when I go home and turn it back on when I'm at work means that, guess what? I'm actually more productive while I'm at home. And so if I don't take that baggage home, if I'm balanced and I don't take baggage home, I can relax at home. Therefore, I can be recharged for the next day, for the next day's events. So balance can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but that's what it means to me. Balance means being able to perform the job at a high level, but at the same time being able to do everything else, because work career, it's only half of your life. And again, I'm still struggling with it, but I think over the last few years, as I've reached that mid manager level, I've gotten better at it. And that's something that I would tell the junior members of my organization, hey, as you're progressing, if this is going to be, the career that you want to continue for the next 20, 25 years, the sooner you learn balance, the better off you'll be, and the better your organization will be because of it. I mean, you and I have both seen it. We both worked under a very demanding boss at one point, and oftentimes he could never turn it off. Now, I did work a little bit closer to him, but and a lot of it had to do that he cared, but he was always stressed out, and at times it would stress the rest of us out, like the rest of us as his staff, as his mid-level managers. So being balanced can have a variety of benefits for the individual and the organization, but most people won't get balanced if you don't mentor them, if you don't highlight it to them and say, hey guy, you're just you're burning the midnight oil too much. You need to think about delegating or finding better ways to get your task accomplished so that you can relax.
Yeah, I mean, I know very junior on, I would have a lot of people tell me, "Hey, you're in the office too much. You're in the office too much. You're in the office too much." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm just doing my job, right?" Because that's like you said, that was expected. And then but when I look back on what was expected of us then and was expected of us now, like you said, it's go, 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 right? So, if you're a car person, I think of it as, someone who's got their hand on the throttle, and they're opening the throttle, right? And they're just letting it go full out and just burning up that fuel, letting it go through, letting it go through, letting it go through. But then you're going to get that gunk, you're going to get that buildup, right? So who is the mechanic who's going to take a step back and clean off that carburetor and kind of spray it off a little bit and say, hey, you need to like slow down a little bit. You're not like Mario Andretti. Just slow down. You'll be okay. You don't have to work as long because a lot of times people didn't define what success was. And I talked about this in one of my first podcast episodes. Like, why do people stay late? Well, people stay late because the boss stays late. And so they think that because he's there, I got to be there because that means if I'm there, I'm more dedicated to the organization and they're going to view me as more dedicated than the other guy. Well, that's not necessarily true. I could just be there playing a game or just doing something else completely unwork related. But because people see me there, they think I'm more dedicated. Like I said, not the case. So when we talk about mentorship, and I look back now, one of the things I tell a lot of junior personnel are, hey, you need to like take a look at what your 10 to 15-year goal is, right? So yes, you may want to be X, Y, and Z, but what are the times that you really have to perform? It didn't dawn on me until a couple of years ago where, every single day, yes, you got to get after it, you got to do the basic stuff, but you don't have to perform 100% of the time, all day, every day. You just have to perform at those key critical moments throughout the day that make all the difference. So I tell people now, I'm like, hey, I think you need to find that key critical moments of what it will get you success and perform there versus, keep going, on, just to be working. So, as you think back on your earlier career, if you were to look yourself, your 18-year-old, your 19-year-old, and your 20-year-old Enrique self in the face as a mentor, what would you tell Enrique?
Great question. So so this is something that I put some thought into, and I try to preach it to my children who are actually young adults now at this point. But the one thing I would tell myself, my younger self, would be don't waste time. Right? It's the only resource you can never get back. And so going back to what you were just talking about, surging, if you will, uh, at certain points of the day to get the job accomplished, right? So what you're actually doing is everything can be equated to sports analogies pretty much. Uh, if you're a long distance runner, there's going to be points in time during that race that you're going to be running a little bit faster, and then you have those intervals in between uh, your run, right? So you run your first, let's say you're running a half marathon, and your first 3 miles are going to be a pretty good pace, and then your next 3 miles you pick it up, and then you slow down for 1 mile, right, and near the midway point to kind of catch your breath, and then again you repeat the cycle, right? Your body gets used to that and going. Um, but I would say don't waste time. Surge when you need to surge, and be aware of your surroundings. I actually had an older boss. It was kind of weird because he was aggressive, and he didn't use the throttle like you did. He used the analogy of the foot pedal. Right, I'm going to put my foot pedal on the gas, and I'm not going to let up. It doesn't matter what we're doing. We're going to ride this out the hard way. But one of the things he did say to us was your subordinates, your employees, your people, they're watching you, right? So it's those second and third order effects that you don't see that happen. Do the younger junior guys that have aspirations to make this their calling, whatever it is, for 15 years, do they want to be burning the midnight oil every day? Right. So when they see you hanging around, you could be working or you could be hanging out because the boss is there. But when they see you grinding and they see, because there's the generational thing too, right? It's a real thing. They see you out there, and then they say to themselves, I don't want that to be me. I'm a 25-year-old guy. I want to go shoot pool or something. I want to go catch up on the latest episode of Game of Thrones, if you will.
Yeah,
I know
you're
that.
absolutely
Yeah.
right, and you bring up a great point. Because when I asked you about your 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old self, I have brother-in-laws, who are about that age now, and actually like 23, 24ish. But anyway, so it's very interesting because when I talk to them, it's like, hey, you just got to put in the effort, dig down deep, get everything you got, and you know I agree with you. A couple of times they've asked me, like, well, if I only got to work like an hour and a half, can I go do something else and be more productive somewhere else and then come back to this when I need to be? And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's not the way our organization works. So you gotta play by the rules until you get to that level where you don't have to. You still have to play by the rules, but until you get to that level where you can do those things that you can influence change. And so with generations, a lot of people I think are looking for instant success, right? Because everything, and I know we're getting off topic from mentorship, and I apologize to whoever's watching, and you're like, I thought you were talking about mentorship, but this kind of ties back into it, right? So
It does,
we
absolutely.
talk about instant success, right? So I didn't grow up with an iPhone. Like I think I was 20 years old when I first had a cell phone, and I think it was like a little Nokia thing, right? And I thought it was the
Hmm.
coolest thing ever. It had like a light up back screen, and I could text somebody, 15 times. I hit the same button, and it was really frustrating. I got, oh man, I got the number three. I need the letter whatever, and you go back. So everything took more time, and there was a step and a process to it. But now it's like, hey, if I want something, I just pick up my phone and I have instant access to it. Children now are having Kindle Fires. Everything is instant. Wi-Fi is instant. Even food now. If I'm hungry, I go to the fridge. I pop it in the microwave. It's loaded with sodium, probably not that healthy, but it's instant. I can get some instant food. I can go to a fast food restaurant. I get what I want when I need it. And
You can get Taco Bell off the old iPhone on Grubhub.
yeah, you know what I'm saying?
You don't even have to leave the house
No,
anymore. Instant gratification.
you're right. It's like I could just do it, right? And then when I look on social media, I click on something, and there's a psychological effect on the brain that sends an endorphin and a release, and it goes, okay, I'm getting what I need now. And a lot of times you can't get what you need right now because you have to go through something and you have to struggle through it and you have to learn through that experience. So, translating patience through experience will equal a better outcome is what I find the hardest thing right now for me, as I mentor people, is to let them know, like, yeah, I know it like sucks right now, and I know it's probably not what you want to do, but it's what you need to do. because you need to
Hmm.
experience those problems so you can recognize that frame set later. When people talk about, how do people make gut instincts? Well, it's because they recognize a pattern set that looks similar to a previous pattern set that they experienced. And because it looks similar, they can provide an instant kind of judgment to it and be kind of right. Not 100% right, but be pretty close to it because they've had experience. And so, with the age of instant gratification now, of how everything is so instant, what would you say to people as your mentor? As a how do you get that curiosity?
You broke up there a little bit at the end, but I think I got the gist of it. I think you hit the nail on the head with explaining the patient's piece. But if you go back to a little bit earlier in our conversation, we got to be able to paint the picture for them, uh, and that being a simple career map. Um, I use a spreadsheet that I built to show where I've been, where I'm at, and where I'm going and how am I going to get there. So uh, it's kind of like the ends, ways, means, right? I think the best thing to do would be to engage them, challenge them with um, mentally, just challenge them mentally because it can be argued on the whole generational thing or instant gratification, but it's tied into the mentorship piece, right? You and I with your your brother-in-laws and my with my older children that are now college age, uh, we teaching them and mentoring. So as they've gotten a little bit older, some of the things they say to me, it's like, "Hey, Dad, you were right about A, B, C, and D," and so I go back and tell them it's because I've experienced a few things. Now, you want gratification, instant gratification. You can't always have that, so you have to have patience. So patience and learning, experience and observing, it's all tied in. But you know, uh, I still see this in some of the junior folks, right? They they want to know now. There was I had a subordinate. She was probably the smartest person I've ever supervised. Not just that, but performed, right? And going back to the 50-50, right? Just kind of circular a little bit with the senior level executive. She's the junior, and I'm at the middle level. She actually tried to go forward, and the higher level guy was so. And I think this is going to tie into a conversation we had before. He was so entrusting of her and her abilities and confident in her abilities that he felt there was really nothing more he could do for developing her,
Hmm.
right? And if he did, he didn't share it. So in a way, she was a little disheartened. But I think that's one of the points where I saw, and as I gained through experience, excuse me, I saw the interaction and I intervened in a good way. So we had about a 30 to 45 minute conversation. And after that conversation, she understood, oh, okay, I get it. I get why he sees these things. I get where he sees, that there's nothing else I can do here. So for her position, right? She had, in lack of a better term, she had peaked. She had mastered her position. She still had a lot to learn, and is still learning. We keep in touch,
Yeah.
but I really believe that it goes back to the communication piece, being able to identify through patience on both parts, on her part and on my part, to see what was happening and to have that, I guess that self awareness to address it then and there. Um,
So
so again,
no, I
no,
just
go
want to
ahead.
jump in, right? So I think you hit on a good point there when you said, she was a rock star, right? She knew the right thing. She was performing, right? Like, what can I tell this person they're performing? But to me, that would be the type of person that needs a mentor, because all too often, A lot of top performing people get overlooked, and you'll see someone who's not so top performing. When you look at things comparatively, but the other person will have a person coaching them and then mentoring them to help them fill in where they're weak at, and helping them identify their weaknesses and move forward in the strengths, and improve the weaknesses into strengths, right? So, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what mentoring is about, is letting people know where they're weak and how to make that into a strength. So that way they become stronger people. But if you're already viewed as strong and you have no weaknesses, you do have weaknesses. You're just not looking at them and you're not identifying them. And then you're discrediting. You're doing a disservice, in my opinion, to those people who are out there, who are top performers, who are doing well, but yet you don't want to invest any more time in them once you leave that organization, because you're like, oh, they're going to do well anyway, whether I invest in them or not. To me, that's a cop out answer. If you're a leader and you see a top performer, invest in that person, because that's the person who you want to lead organizations. Otherwise, somebody else is going to rise to the occasion, who may not be as good, but they had a mentor who helped them understand their weaknesses and they got better, right? So there's goodness in both things, but it does a disservice to somebody who is viewed as a rock star, and then no one invests in them because they're like, well, you're okay. And like you said, 50-50. I slightly disagree with that. I've thought about it for like the last couple of days, since we had talked about it. I was like, is it really 50-50, or should it be more like 40-60? So 40% on the mentee part, 60% on the senior part. So if I am more senior, or I have a greater level of experience in something than than the person I'm mentoring, right? That person's not going to be as willing to come to me at first. I have to initiate the dialogue. I have to follow up. I have to, if you're a fisherman, you have to cast that line out there with the bait and say, here's something for you that's good. Come get it. I know bait's not good for fish, but just follow me with this. I'm going somewhere. So when you get that, um, let them get the goodness from it and keep following up with them, and then over time it'll be the other way. It'll be 60-40, where the mentee seeks the mentor more. What do you think about that?
So, yeah, I think you made some really good points. But before we go a little further, I wanted to add on to the rock star analogy, right, that we were making. When you get the rock star that you don't want to invest any more time into them because they're already performing, you you risk you risk losing that rock star because they can feel underappreciated, or if they feel like they've met their full potential, they're going to look for the next big thing, or the next better
Yeah,
organization. So yeah, just to add on to that, great point on that piece. You don't want to lose the rock stars, definitely.
and
You,
I'll
you,
I'll
you,
be honest with you. So I've seen a lot of good people decide to leave organizations because they're like, what, I don't think I'm very much valued here. Like, I see myself performing. I'm looking around. I think I'm okay, but I'm not treated like I'm okay. So I'm gonna go somewhere else, right? And it's sad to see that happen, because then you're losing really, really, really good people just because there's a lack of leadership and also a lack of mentorship. But I hate to cut you off, but I just want to hammer that point in again because it happens every single day. And then when someone leaves, and I'm in a unique position where people actually come to me and like, hey, this guy's leaving. I don't understand why. Like, well, he's leaving because you treated him this way and he viewed himself or herself as not good. So it's your fault that couldn't actually happen. Because me, I'm just brutal in the way I talk. I believe in honesty, and sometimes it's bad, but it's true. So go ahead.
yeah. I think I might have gotten a little bit sidetracked, but at least because we're going all over the place with, I think, good topics here. You were saying that you think it's more of a 60-40, and I would agree. And I guess what I was trying to say with the 50-50 is really the effort. it's not to say that they're equal in, say, knowledge or experience, or in talent or ability, but in terms of making the effort, needs to be 50-50. If you've got, someone who's been in the organization 15 years versus someone that's been in for 2 years in that same organization, of course, they're going to know the tricks of the trade, or they should know the tricks of the trade, or the ins and outs of the organization, right? So yes, yes, it's not gonna be a complete 50-50 inputs and outputs, right? But in terms of effort to make that, to bridge that gap, um, relationship wise, the relationships matter. Maintaining those relationships, even if someone leaves an organization, is important, because who knows, you may be able to attract them back to the organization much later, right? So continuing, like as you were saying before, even if they're a rock star, and you invest in them and you keep contact with them, you build those relationships, and maybe one day they come back as a senior executive, to bring that fresh blood. It happens all the time. Folks will leave, uh, maybe because they want new challenges or looking for greener pastures, and they become seasoned. So I think that's another point that could be made, that if you continue to mentor, establish those longer term relationships, professional relationships, you can probably attract some of those people to come back and to show them, hey, this really was a good organization, or hey, what did you learn on working with John over at ABC Corporation? Would you be interested in bringing back uh, some of those lessons learned, if you will, or best practices? So